Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're doing a deep dive into something that's really taken off, especially since, the big shift to remote and hybrid work. We're talking about algorithmic management, AI-powered tools watching people at work.
Yeah, it's explode, isn't it?
It really has. And these tools, like keystroke loggers, webcam analytics, systems that automatically score your performance, they're sold to companies as these objective, efficient things. Get rid of human bias, streamline supervision. That's the pitch.
That's the promise, yeah. More efficiency, maybe more fairness even.
But the research we've looked at paints a pretty different picture. It warns that this is a huge shift and the risks are really significant. Human risks.
Hmm.
Just to give everyone a sense of scale, we're seeing figures like over half of large U.S. employers are already using some kind of electronic monitoring.
Wow, over 50%. That's widespread.
It's not sci-fi anymore. It's just reality for a lot of workers.
Yeah.
So before we even get into the kind of the human cost, the stress and all that, we need to look under the hood, technically speaking. What are the sort of foundational problems, the two main technical flaws that make these supposedly objective systems, well, potentially dangerous?
Right. And what's fascinating here is that the problems often aren't about like malicious intent. It's more about how they're built. These systems, they work by grabbing just enormous amounts of real-time data.
Like what kind of data?
Everything. Eye movements, your typing rhythm, how long you pause between clicks, posture sometimes, and it pulls all that together into a profile or a
What?
score.
Or productivity score.
Exactly. So the first big risk is algorithmic bias.
Right.
Basically, the AI is only as smart or maybe as fair as the data you feed it.
Right. Garbage in, garbage out, sort of.
Kind of, but more like bias in, bias out. If the historical data, say on hiring or promotions, reflects past inequalities, maybe men got promoted more often, the AI doesn't learn who's actually good at the job. It learns that historically men were promoted. So it replicates that bias.
And we saw a really big, kind of famous example of this in the research, didn't we?
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
The Amazon hiring AI is the classic case study here. They trained it on like 10 years of their own hiring data,
Oh,
which turned out to be heavily male-dominated, especially in tech roles.
okay.
So the system quickly figured out that being male was a positive signal, and it started actively penalizing resumes that had anything suggesting the applicant was female.
Even just the word women's, like women's chess club captain.
Exactly, that kind of thing. They had to completely scrap the system because it was just baking in discrimination.
Wow.
And that kind of leads into the second way bias creeps in, which is more subtle, proxy bias.
Proxy bias,
Yeah.
what's that exactly?
So the algorithm doesn't even need to look at protected characteristics like race or gender directly. It can use other data points that seem neutral on the surface. Things like your zip code, maybe which university you went to, even maybe your browsing history patterns.
Okay.
But if those seemingly neutral things strongly correlate with, say, race or gender, then the algorithm ends up having the same discriminatory effect, just indirectly.
So the system might look fair on paper because it's not using race as a variable, but it's still disadvantaging certain groups because it's using these proxies instead.
Precisely. It finds statistical correlations and optimizes for them,
Yeah.
even if they reflect societal biases. Now, the second major technical flaw, and this one is maybe even more damaging to trust, is opaque decision-making, the black box problem.
Ah, the black box. Heard this term a lot.
Yeah. So these deep learning networks, neural networks, they're incredibly complex, often so complex that even the people who designed them can't fully trace why a specific input led to a specific output.
So let's say I'm an employee. I get a really bad performance score. Maybe I'm even flagged for, potential termination. I go to my manager and ask why. Are you saying neither my manager nor the system can actually tell me the specific reasons?
That's often the case. They might know the general factors it considers, but not the specific weighting or interaction of, say, 10,000 data points that led to your specific score.
So how can I possibly appeal that? Or argue against it if I don't know the logic?
That's the critical issue. It basically destroys due process. If the decision logic is hidden, how can you challenge it meaningfully? It fundamentally shifts power. The employee has no way to audit the decision affecting their job, their livelihood. All the power rests with whoever runs the system.
Okay, that's a huge problem. If the tech itself is flawed and opaque, then the human impact must be pretty intense.
Let's talk about that. The effect on people's privacy, their well-being, when they're constantly being monitored digitally.
Yeah, the human cost is really where this hits home.
And the privacy invasion, it goes way beyond just like reading work emails,
Yeah.
right? Oh, much deeper. We're talking about tools collecting really granular, sensitive stuff.
For example.
Well, some studies show that things like keystroke rhythms, how you type, can unintentionally reveal behavioral patterns, or even potentially neurological issues, like hand tremors. That becomes a medical privacy risk, and the employee might not even be aware it's being inferred.
Wow. And for remote workers, this isn't happening in some sterile office.
Exactly, it's happening in their home.
So when you have webcam analytics checking if someone's looking at the screen,
The camera is inevitably capturing their home environment. Maybe family members walk past, personal items are visible. The line between work surveillance and, well, home intrusion just vanishes.
you're basically putting a company camera in your living room.
Pretty much. And think about all that data being collected, the sheer volume.
That sounds like a security nightmare waiting to happen.
It is. For the employer, too, not just the employee. That huge collection of personal biometric behavioral data, it's a goldmine for hackers, a massive liability.
Right. And we saw something about employees themselves creating risks with AI tools.
Yeah, that's the other side of it.
Good.
A 2025 report we looked at found something staggering, like 93% of employees admitted they share confidential company data using unauthorized third-party AI tools.
93%.
Yeah. So the company uses AI to monitor, maybe for security, but all this data flying around, including through unapproved channels, it just massively increases the organization's own vulnerabilities. It's a double-edged sword.
Okay, so data security aside, what about just the psychological pressure? Being watched all the time.
It's immense, the constant feeling of being measured, judged by an algorithm. It leads to serious stress, burnout, lower job satisfaction. It takes a real toll.
And there are numbers to back that up, right?
Yeah, clear statistics. One study showed, I think 56% of workers who are monitored report feeling high tension at work.
Compared to
Only 40% of workers who aren't monitored. That's a significant jump. More than half the monitored workforce feeling stressed out because the algorithm is breathing down their neck.
And does that pressure actually make people work better? Or does it backfire?
Well, it often leads to what the sources call the chilling effect.
Chilling effect.
Meaning people become afraid to experiment. They stick to the absolute standard procedure, even if a slightly different approach might be better or more creative.
Because they don't want to get flagged by the system as doing something wrong or inefficient.
Exactly. They don't want to deviate from what the algorithm expects. So innovation, creativity, problem solving, that gets stifled. You optimize for the metric, not the actual goal.
Which leads, ironically, to this productivity paradox you mentioned earlier.
Precisely. The whole point is supposed to be boosting productivity, right? But when the monitoring gets too intense, too focused on shallow metrics,
People just game the system.
they do. They start focusing on, actual quality work, like writing clean code or making a customer happy. Instead, they focus purely on looking busy for the algorithm, getting their keystroke count up, making sure their screen doesn't go idle, maybe using one of those mouse jigglers.
Mouse jigglers. Seriously.
Oh, yeah. Little devices or bits of software that keep the cursor moving so the system thinks you're active.
So the company thinks it's gaining efficiency, but it's actually getting employees who are experts at performing productivity, not necessarily achieving it.
That's the paradox. You gain data, maybe control, but you lose genuine output, quality, and potentially long-term innovation. You burn out your people for metrics.
Okay, so if that's the human cost, let's talk about the legal and financial side. Are companies actually getting into trouble for this?
Definitely. Regulators and courts are starting to push back, especially when it involves really sensitive stuff like biometrics or crossing into private life.
Like the White Castle case in the U.S.?
That's a big one. They used fingerprint scanners for employees clocking in and out. But under Illinois' specific biometric privacy law, BIPA, they allegedly didn't get the right kind of explicit consent first. The potential fine was astronomical, something like $17 billion theoretically, because the law allows fines per scan per employee. It shows the massive liability around biometric data.
Wow. And Europe's been active, too, with GDPR.
Very active. H&M got hit with a huge fine, $35.3 million, for really excessive monitoring of their employees in Germany, keeping detailed notes on private lives, things like that.
And Amazon again?
Amazon's French warehouses? Yeah. Fined by the CNIL, the French Data Protection Authority. They said the tracking was excessively intrusive. Things like tracking idle time down to the minute, measuring scanner speed so precisely it was causing immense stress, and keeping all that super detailed data for too long.
So regulators are saying there are limits. Pervasive surveillance isn't okay.
Exactly. And it's not just regulators. Courts are stepping in too.
Like the Dutch case.
Right. A court in the Netherlands ruled that forcing an employee to keep their webcam on constantly for monitoring could violate their fundamental rights, their right to privacy in their own home.
That's a really important precedent. It establishes that this kind of intrusion is a legal harm.
It does. So for you listening, maybe you're seeing these tools appear in your own workplace or you're involved in choosing them. What are the warning signs, the red flags that an AI monitoring system might be harmful?
Good question. What should people look out for?
Well, one big red flag is if the system is obsessed with activity versus outcome. Is it measuring keystrokes per minute, time logged in, things that are easy to count? Or is it looking at actual results, client satisfaction, project completion, quality of work?
If it's just counting clicks, it encourages that looking busy problem.
Exactly. It incentivizes gaming the system, not doing good work. That's the productivity paradox in action.
Okay, what else?
Second flag, unilateral decision-making. Does the algorithm get the final say? If there's no requirement for a human manager to review the data, to apply context, and crucially, if there's no clear, fair process for an employee to appeal or contest a bad rating generated by the system, that's a huge red flag for fairness.
The machine shouldn't be judge, jury, and executioner.
Absolutely not. It should support human judgment, not replace it entirely, especially for important decisions. And the third flag, look for disparate impact. Even if the system isn't supposed to be biased, check the results. Is there statistical evidence that its scores, or the actions taken based on those scores, are disproportionately affecting a particular group? Women, older workers, people from certain backgrounds?
Even if it's using those proxy variables we talked about earlier.
Right. If the outcome is biased, the system is biased, regardless of intent. That needs investigation and correction.
Okay, so we've got the problems, the risks, the red flags. What about solutions? How do we move towards a fairer way of using this tech? What did the sources call it? Algorithmic hygiene.
Yeah, algorithmic hygiene. It's about building fairness and safety in from the start, not trying to tack it on later.
Right.
And regulation is a big part of that.
Right, the guardrails are going up, like GDPR in Europe.
Exactly. GDPR forces companies to do data protection impact assessments, DPIAs, before they roll out high-risk systems like invasive monitoring. They have to think about the risks first. And GDPR also gives people the right not to be subject to decisions based solely on automated processing if it has significant effects. That human review element is key.
And the new EU AI Act seems to be doubling down on that for employment tech.
It really is. It specifically calls out AI used in employment hiring, promotion, performance management as high risk. That means those systems will face really strict rules on data quality, risk management, transparency, and mandatory human oversight. It's a big step.
And we're seeing similar ideas elsewhere too, like in the US or South Africa.
Yeah, the trend is global. State laws in the U.S., like the CCPA in California, are pushing for more transparency, telling employees what data is collected and why. South Africa's POPIA emphasizes data minimization. Only collect what you absolutely need for a specific purpose.
So the legal pressure is mounting against just vacuuming up all possible data.
Definitely. But compliance isn't enough, right? It also needs better design, human-centered design.
Like technically, what can be done in the system itself?
Well, one big area is explainable AI, or XAI.
Making the black box less black?
Exactly. Designing systems so they can actually provide a understandable reason for their outputs. Why did I get this score? XAI aims to answer that, which is crucial for auditing and appeals.
Okay. And what about limiting the data collection itself? You mentioned something called edge summarization.
Yeah, that's a really interesting technical approach. Instead of sending like a continuous raw video feed from a webcam or every single keystroke back to a central server, the analysis happens locally on the employee's device at the edge. It extracts the key features or calculates a score and only sends that summary back.
So the really sensitive raw data stays local, doesn't get stored centrally.
Right. It minimizes the privacy risk hugely. It's a much more proportionate way to gather insights without grabbing everything.
Beyond the tech, what about policies? Governance?
Absolutely critical. Mandating those impact assessments before anything gets deployed, and crucially, involving workers. Co-designing monitoring policies with employee reps or unions. Getting their buy-in and feedback. That builds trust.
And always keeping a human in the loop, especially for negative consequences.
That has to be non-negotiable. No fully automated firing or discipline based solely on an algorithm's score. There must be meaningful human review considering context that the algorithm can't see. And underlying all of this is the principle of proportionality.
Meaning?
Only collect the data that is strictly necessary for a legitimate, specific business purpose. Don't monitor everything just because you can.
So no mandatory webcams watching people's living rooms unless there's an incredibly compelling specific reason.
Exactly. The justification bar needs to be very, very high for that level of intrusion.
So wrapping this up, this deep dive really highlights a core tension in the modern workplace, doesn't it?
It really does. This drive towards algorithmic management, it promises efficiency, data-driven decisions.
But it comes loaded with these serious risks. Deeply embedded bias, massive privacy concerns, and real psychological harm to employees.
Yeah. And the challenge now isn't really if these technologies will be used. They're already here, as you said.
The question is how. How are they designed? How are they governed?
Hmm. Organizations that really embed fairness, transparency, accountability right into the technology, into the policies, not just as an afterthought for the lawyers.
Those are the ones that will likely build a more sustainable and, frankly, more human future of work.
Well said.
So, we'll leave you with this thought, building on that productivity paradox we discussed. If this constant granular monitoring makes employees stressed, less creative, more focused on just hitting metrics instead of achieving real quality, is the organization actually gaining the efficiency it thinks it is? Or is it just trading long-term innovation and human well-being for this sort of short-term illusion of data-driven control?
Something to definitely mull over.
Indeed. Until the next deep dive.
See you then.